Welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and Giallo enthusiasts. This is episode 2 of the Rat Hole Burn reviews, and I just finished watching The Sweet Body of Deborah, 1968 by Romolo Guerrieri, and I got some thoughts. So, let me get this cigar started. This is actually probably, I don't know if this is my favorite, but this was my first favorite brand, which is Romeo y Julieta, and this is their Toro. So this was like the first cigar I really kind of fell in love with, like a long time ago. Let me get this started. Okay. First thing I'll say is I'm probably not going to be talking about this as much as I was talking about Deadly Sweet last time because, well, you know, it was good, but I was not like really blown away. Funny enough, it did remind me of several other Jolly, several other Carol Baker Jolly, several other Carol Baker and John Sorrell Jolly, and a few others, but there was a lot of moments here and there that were like, oh, that reminds me of this movie, that reminds me of that one. But first thing I'll say about it is it starts and it's Carol Baker and John Sorrell, is that it felt like this was the prequel to A Quiet Place to Kill, or the sequel if they didn't get caught. But so it's nice to see John Sorrell always in these movies. Carol Baker can be kind of hit or miss for me. I mean, I don't ever dislike seeing her. It's just I always feel the character is the same. And last time I was talking about how Ava Olen's characters are kind of the same, but I like it. I think she nails that character. I don't know, the Carol Baker character, even though it's the same, it's not quite as charming to me, I'll say. But good. So this was the first Romolo Guerrieri. That just doesn't roll off the tongue for me. Romolo Guerrieri. This was the first of his films I've seen. This is the first Giallo movie he did, which is a proto-Giallo. The movie is like March 1968. And I think he only made like 2 total or 3 total. I know he did the double, which is Klaus Kinski and Ava Olen, a few others. Haven't seen that yet. I might be watching that. We'll see. I'm actually about to be, soon enough, I'm going to be a couple months away from like covering it, whether I do that in Forgotten Giallo Films or an actual deep dive. I have to see if that movie is actually even available on DVD or Blu-ray. But movie starts, like I said, it does remind me of A Quiet Place to Kill several times. They are newlyweds. They go to Geneva early on in the first act so Carol Baker can be acquainted with where her husband, I should say, where he grew up. And they get there and they meet. He sees a guy that he knows, Philippe, and the guy kind of, even though they make eye contact, he doesn't acknowledge him. He like walks out of the club they're at, and he tells his wife about it. Like, I know that guy. He acted like he didn't know me. And he goes outside to talk with him. The guy's like, "You're a murderer." And he's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, he brings up, well, I forgot what the girl's name is, but it was this other girl he was with previously that he was engaged to, and guess he left her, and Philippe says she killed herself. So he's blaming him. He's saying that's all on you. And Jean Sorrell and Carol Baker then go to this like villa to get more information. I don't remember exactly how that led into that, but goes in there and he starts hearing, I want to say it's Symphony Number 6 by Tchaikovsky. And it jumped out to me because it's the first song that plays during the death sequence in Soylent Green. If you've seen that movie, the guy goes to this facility where they basically like euthanize you, and they give you some drugs and they lay you down in this room that's got like a screen all around it, and 365 degrees you're seeing views of what the world looked like before humans like destroyed it. Anyways, the Tchaikovsky song is like the first song as he's coming in there and getting strapped up and getting full of like loaded on drugs, and that song plays in this movie, and it plays like it plays damn near like 13 times maybe. So every time he hears it, it reminds him of his last girlfriend, his last fiance, and he starts becoming suspicious that, you know, someone is setting him up. And like they hear the music, they hear the piano playing, go in there, there's no, the piano is untouched. The scene right before that, or the moment right before that, Carol Baker comes in, puts her cigarette out in an ashtray, and notices there's another cigarette in the ashtray that is still warm and has like lipstick on it. And so she's like, there's someone else in here. He's like, what? Eventually then the phone rings, and oh, his name is Marcel, which I thought was funny. I was like, isn't that his name also in A Quiet Place to Kill? And she answers it, and a guy's voice is on the line. It sounds identical to the guy who was voicing Philippe, and he tells her, like, you're going to die. You're going to die because Marcel must be punished for his sins. And they go to leave, and they hear the music again coming from inside the house, and Deborah, who's Carol Baker's character, is like, please, let's just leave. And he's like, I want to find out who it is, though. And as they leave, you then see Philippe watching them go from, like, the woods, from, like, the forest. And so immediately you're like, okay, there's got to be two people doing this conspiracy, at least, unless either the movie's just sloppy or there's, like, supernatural stuff going on. And let's see. Marcel, I'll say this real quick. Now, the movie is pretty well written, pretty well acted. There's a couple little things that are a little sloppy with the voice, the dubbing, which is curious because it was shot in English. And I was watching, the DVD I have is a Spanish DVD because they don't sell like a US print of the movie, at least not anymore. And so it had all these different language dubs, Spanish, Italian, English, German, but the subtitles were only in Spanish, and there was like multiple different options, but they were only Spanish. So I had to watch the movie with the English dub, which, like I said, it wasn't really that, I mean, usually, like I say, I always try to watch it in original Italian with English subtitles. I'll make exceptions if the English spoken version is more popular, or if they're in like England or something, or even if they filmed it in English, I'll make exceptions. Or if it's just that's the only option I have, then I make do. I felt better knowing that it was actually filmed in English. I was like, that's fine, whatever. But anyways, there's a few parts where either you see someone speaking and there's no dubbing for it, which could be that that's just the way it's being shot in some scenes. Like they're driving around the city and they're in the car and they're like, and I'm like, there's music playing, so you're like, okay, that's just what that is. But then there's times where they actually are speaking, and you can tell there was either more to the line, or they just didn't sync it correctly how they redubbed it. Because there was a few parts where someone would say something, and the sentence would end like this. I was like, you couldn't just like cut half a second off. And then the other thing then for me that was not the cleanest was the editing, particularly how one scene would then go to the next. There was a few times where I chuckled because of how the editing was, where it was like the scene where they're in that abandoned villa, and they're like, and Deborah's like holding onto Marcel, and she's like, please, let's go. And then it just cuts to them walking to the car, like 3 feet between them. And so it just felt a little disjointed. There's a few other moments like that. But another editing part, which is why I brought that up, is it then kind of cuts to him like Marcel walking into a car wash, and his car's being washed, and he's like, who told you to wash the car? And the guy's like, your wife did. And then he's like, okay, I'll take a taxi. And he leaves, and it's just like, First off, that's just a little confusing. Like, I have so many questions. Like, why did he just walk into this car wash as his car is being washed and be like, "Who told you to wash the car?" It's like, were you just going for a walk? And I don't know. It's just seems a little off. It seems like they were missing like a scene before that or something. But he's getting a ride home, and then he sees his car parked out, and he tells the taxi to stop, and he gets out and he goes and he checks, and it is his car. It's got his license plate. And then he looks inside, and there's like a little cafe, and he sees the back of Deborah sitting down talking with Philippe, and she gets up and they kind of like hug or whatever. And so now Marcel's very suspicious. Like, what is she up to? Confronts her about it. She swears she was like, I was just trying to like talk to him to get him to leave us alone. And then they end up going, I think, back to somewhere in France for the next half of the movie, and they're staying at this villa. There's some funny parts, but they're more just awkward funny. Like, John Sorrell has a few lines that I'm like, that does not land the same way it did in 1968. They're looking around the villa. First off, he carries her over the threshold, and he's like, I want to be traditional or something. And then they're taking the tour of the house, and she says something like, and now for the most important room. And he's like, the kitchen. And then they go into the bedroom, and what does she say? She quips something about how, like, I'm pretty sure if you're hungry, you can find something to eat. And he's like, I love to eat little girls. Just like, what? There's a few other lines that are like that are just like, huh? Then they notice that they have this neighbor who's an artist, I think is played by George Hilton. And he's kind of very voyeuristic. And even later on in the movie, like a little bit later on, he does say, like, I'm a voyeur. But he's always kind of just like watching them, and he makes weird comments to them. Like, what does he say? He said something that was just like, is that come off more poetic in another language? Like, but he says, because he's painting like a painting of like a worm or something, and he says he tells them, like, I'm your neighbor, da 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 da, and they're kind of like, okay, like, why are you like looking over here? And he's like, well, I mean, I live down there. I was just over here painting this worm. And he's like, if you want to reenact Adam and Eve, there's an apple under that tree, and we know who the snake is. What? Anyways, as the movie goes on, you're really trying to piece together, okay, what is I keep forgetting what his last fiance's name was. Is she really dead? Is Felipe trying to drive one of them crazy? Is, like, these are the more obvious things that you might be thinking as you're watching it. But if you've seen enough Giallo films, especially ones with Carol Baker and or John Sorrell, you start bringing them more into doubt. Like, wait a minute. And there was a scene. Oh, first off, I'm going to bring this up. So there's another part that reminded me of A Quiet Place to Kill, which is funny because, again, this movie precedes all these other movies that it kind of has allusions to. Quiet Place to Kill, there's a scene where Carol Baker is driving down the cliffside road, I guess we'll call it, with John Sorrell, and she's like speeding, but she used to be a circuit driver, a circuit race car driver, so she knows how to drive, and she's going really fast, and he's like, slow down. He's freaking out, and then she stops right before she gets to this like hard 90-degree turn area, and the car is like right on the edge, and John Sorrell gets out, and he kind of looks at how close the car is and looks over the cliff. And they do this same scene in this movie, which again came out 2 years earlier, where they're driving, and now I can't even remember where it was. Oh yeah, and like they almost get hit by like a construction vehicle or something, and they go up on like this embankment, and same thing, he gets out of the car and like looks, and then they're like, well, I guess let's switch who's driving. And there's gonna be a lot of similarities to A Quiet Place to Kill predominantly, and I did this a lot when I was talking about Deadly Sweet, but because the two main leads were in a later Giallo, it was just really funny how many similarities there were, and in this movie there were a lot of similarities to A Quiet Place to Kill. But as it goes on, they then go to a club, which was, again, a little reminiscent of some other movies, I guess a little bit of Orgasmo. And Marcel takes a minute to go get Deborah a drink or something, but he walks away. And then the artist, the neighbor, goes up and he starts dancing with Deborah, and he tries to kiss her. It's just like, okay. And Marcel comes back, and so now he's a little suspicious, and yada, yada, yada. Interesting stuff. Then we get this scene where, they find out really quickly that, sorry, I'm skipping over some things. There's then a random scene where Deborah and Marcel are out playing Twister. Is it Twister? Yeah, I think so. On the lawn, and it's all romantic, ha 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 ha. And then the next record plays, and it's again Tchaikovsky, which this is like the 10th time the song is played. And Marcel gets up, takes the record off, and he's like, "Why did you put this record on? Like, you know how this makes me feel." She's like, I didn't do it. I just grabbed a bunch of records, and they were on shuffle, I guess." And he like completely like obliterates the record, and then they receive a phone call. They go inside and they receive a phone call, and it sounds like Philippe, and he's basically saying, "You will die, you will die, you will die." And Deborah points out that it's a recording. He's not actually on the line. It's just a tape recording. Then we get this intense scene where they're in bed. Oh, this was also kind of funny. They're having sex while the picture. For some reason, Deborah brought this framed picture they found when they were in the abandoned house of his ex-fiance. I don't know what her reasoning was. She was just like, "Yeah, I just thought it was nice." And they're having sex, and like it'll cut to just like the picture, and it'll cut back to them. And Carol Baker's like, "Ah!" Just like having the loudest, most intense sex noises. And okay. Anyways, later that night, she awakens and hears footsteps in the house, and wakes Marcel and tells him there's someone in the house. He gets out of bed, pulls a gun out of the side table. What do you call that? The nightstand. And he goes to investigate it, and he leaves the room, and then Philippe walks in, and he pulls out a stiletto knife, and he attacks Deborah, and then Marcel comes back in and shoots him, and then he falls on the bed, and Deborah goes to Marcel, but then Philippe jumps up and attacks them again, and then somehow Marcel drops the gun, and then it's him versus Philippe with the knife, and he fights him off, kicks the knife away. They're wrestling a little bit, and then it does a shot that is then used in So Sweet, So Perverse, where the scene where Carol Baker and what's her name? Is it Erica Blanc? They're watching the two men fight, and you can't tell who's who. You just see an arm come up from behind something with a knife and stab down. Same thing happens, and so she freaks out, assuming that Philippe has stabbed her husband, and then turns out that it was Marcel, and he stabbed him, killed him. And now they start planning about we gotta just get rid of the body, and we just gotta leave. And so now it's reminding me of A Quiet Place to Kill, with the whole we killed someone, now we gotta get rid of it. And he buries the body, and then the next day she wakes up, and he left a note saying, "Pack everything, we're leaving." It cuts to him, and he's at the airport trying to book a flight to New York, I think, and the flight is entirely booked, so they have to try to find another one. And then something else I should point out, I glossed over this because it wasn't really coming up until at this moment. Carol Baker is doing that stereotypical Giallo thing where she's taking pills with alcohol throughout the movie, and so anything that happens with her could possibly be hallucinations. And also, after the scene in the abandoned house where they got the phone call, they tried to get like the telephone company to look into it, and they said no, that phone has been like off the line for over a year. And he gets some guys to go in there and look around, and one of them, the expert, is telling him, no, there's nobody could have made a call on this phone. It's not connected to a line, and it's like it's just not even connected to anything. And he's like, so you're saying my wife is crazy? Like, I didn't say that. He's like, well, I heard the phone call ring too. And he's like, well, maybe you did. You know, maybe you're just hearing things. Okay, wondering how that will come up. But anyway, so we back to where I was saying. Carol Baker looks out and sees the grave is like empty, and then she looks over and sees Philippe like just kind of standing out in the lawn, and he looks over, looks into her eyes, and I think she drops a cigarette or something, and she immediately kind of has to like stomp it out, looks up, he's gone, and she starts hearing the music again. Gotta get more Tchaikovsky. Starts hearing that song again, finds another record playing, and then she turns around and there's a woman standing there. And then she sees Philippe, and she kind of passes out. And then I keep saying, and then it'll cut back to Marcel still trying to book a flight, and then he has to come home, get his wife, let her know, and I gotta stop saying and. So this is all deep spoiler territory. I should have said that. Philippe and the ex-fiance, again, sorry for the life of me, I cannot remember her name. They take some of Deborah's drugs, break them up, force them into her mouth, and then when she is passing out from this, they take a razor blade and they cut her wrists. And they mentioned that they should probably stick around for like 10 minutes just to make sure that the job is done. And then I guess they don't do that. But Philippe puts the razor, he's been wearing gloves this whole time. He puts the razor then in her hand and like has her pinch it. So it seems like she did this. And I'm like, okay, that's very strange advice of Mrs. Ward. And then they leave. They lock the door from the inside and they leave. And then there's this pretty funny part where Marcel is driving home, and their two cars pass, and it's like an overhead shot. And the two cars pass, and they both stop, and then they back up. And they both roll down their windows, and they tell him, we did as you asked. It's done. She's dead. We made it look like she killed herself. We locked the door from the inside so it won't look like forced entry or anything. And he thanks them, tells them he'll meet them in, I think, Geneva again. Oh, Suzanne was her name. He says, I love you, Suzanne. She says, I love you too. Which, again, don't know if I wasn't paying attention or something, but I don't understand why he wasn't with her, why he... Like, the reason that he gave, and again, I'm sorry that I'm kind of forgetting everything in chronological order, but when he was telling his wife about it, what happened, he was saying that, yes, I was in love with this girl. I was more of in lust with her. Like, I didn't really love her. I just kind of loved her body and having sex with her. And one time Philippe came in and caught us, and even though we were together, he was in love with her, so he was upset with me, and he must be very mad at me that I left her and that, you know, she fell apart. So that's for the audience to assume, oh, okay, so it is this guy. But again, if you've seen enough of these movies, you know Jean Sorel is probably a scumbag. It's just the way it is. It's just funny because I really like him. He's a really good actor. So yeah, I didn't quite understand why I missed it, why he ended up leaving her and then meeting Deborah, because he says, I met you around the time that I left her. And then also the scene where there's where they almost drive off the cliff. There's a little line about, oh, you trying to kill me for my insurance money? And so that was for me kind of like a reference to fourth victim, which, well, not a reference to because that didn't come out yet, but I keep talking about how it feels like there's a hodgepodge of other Giallo scenes in this movie, which is, again, this is 1968, before some of those other ones, but that was like, okay, another Carol Baker Giallo right there, fourth victim. Going back to where we were, they tell Marcel, how, you can go in there, you'll find her dead. You should probably call the neighbors to make it look more legitimate when you call the police, so they can see that, you're like, you're all disheveled. He gets home, he goes to unlock the door is unlocked, and the door, it's like, it's not even unlocked, it's like it was open. Like, he goes to unlock it and the door just pushes open, so he knows something is up. He goes in, looks around, goes into the bedroom, and Deborah's not there. Instead, it is, what's his name, the artist, George Hilton, just lying on the bed. And he tells him, like, congratulations, I saw everything, what a good plan. Yeah, you guys really thought this through, except that I saw you through the window. Because, again, earlier he said, I'm a voyeur, I like watching people. And he tells Marcel that, well, you can pay me to leave you alone. I'll take $100,000. And Marcel pulls out his gun on him, and he's like, "Oh, you're not gonna shoot me. Like you need to know where she is. It's not gonna. The police are never gonna believe you. That So he's like, okay, fine, tell me where she is. And I forgot exactly what he says, but George Hilton kind of tricks him into admitting, like, that he had, two co-conspirators do this, and now he needs to know where she is, blah, 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 blah. As he's, like, saying this, incriminating himself, he's walking forward, and then he turns over to the nightstand, and you can see the telephone is off the hook, and then it cuts to, like, three inspectors in trench coats in some other room listening to the phone call. And it's like, oh, you got busted. That's good. And he's like, who's on the phone? And he goes to attack George Hilton. Sorry, I forget his name. The cops bust in, and no. George Hilton shoots him. He has a gun too, I think, and he pops Marcel. Marcel goes down, kind of tries to lunge at him, shoot him, and then shoots him again. Then the cops come in, and they just roll John Sorrell over. They're just like, all right, well, open and shut case. That's all there is, I guess. And then George Hilton is asking, or they're like congratulating him, like, thank you for calling us. And he says, what about Deborah? Because he clearly liked her. He told her also. Again, I'm missing all these details, but when he told her he was a voyeur, he basically also told her, like, look, I really like you. He said, what about her? Is she okay? They're like, she's fine. She's recovering. If it had been a few more minutes, she would have died. She would have lost too much blood. We then have a scene with Carol Baker talking with the inspectors, and they're telling her that we caught Philippe and Suzanne at the airports. They confessed to everything. We had them sign affidavits, yada, yada, yada. And then the last scene is Deborah meeting with George Hilton's character, and they're driving off, and she's saying, well, now that he's dead, I actually am going to cash in on the $300,000 life insurance policy. And she says something like, isn't that funny? He wanted me dead, and in the end, I ended up cashing in on the insurance. And it's kind of implied that, like, I mean, yes, it is a joke, or like, haha, like, who got the last laugh? But it also kind of seems to insinuate that maybe she did know what something was up, and she conspired with this guy to ultimately have her come out on top, which was really good. And so that, again, reminded me of Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward. All in all, really good. There were times that it was a little slow. It kind of felt stylistically, it kind of felt a little bit like Ernesto. No, sorry, not Ernesto. It felt a little bit like Umberto Lenzi, a little bit of Mario Bava. Way more toned down though. I mean, there were definitely some zooms, but it wasn't like over the top zooms. It weren't really as much of the Bava stylistic things, like all the fade outs at the end of scenes. Like I said, a scene would just cut to a next scene, and there wasn't really any like flair about it. The music was good. There was like 2 other songs that were supposed to be the Giallo theme to this movie. The scenes in the club were very, very 60s, but other than that, it was just Tchaikovsky, the same song, which is Symphony Number 6. I don't know if it's Patetica or Pathetic or Pathetic or what. I don't know how to say it. I didn't look it up. That song, I like that song, but it plays a damn lot. So that was kind of like Orgasmo with that same song that by whoever they are that just plays throughout the movie. Yeah, interesting, because this movie really did do a lot that paved the way for other Giallo movies to kind of pick out parts from. And you maybe can't really say that they're totally taken, but it kind of does. Like I said, the part with the cars, the part where they almost crash and Jean Sorel gets out and like looks, shot almost the same. Not really, like, but it's sequenced the same. I mean, on paper it's the same how it's written. Yeah, I like it. Would I put it now in my top 10 for the 60s? I don't know, because by adding Deadly Sweet last time, so sweet, so perverse. Ooh, okay. So this is competing with The Girl Who Knew Too Much then, in this case, because I had that movie ranked 9th. So is this better than The Girl Who Knew Too Much? Dude, that is a rough one. I would say I could see some people saying, yes, it is better. I'm going to say I prefer The Girl Who Knew Too Much. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it's better. I really like Letitia Roman, however you say her name. Again, I don't know where she comes from. I don't know how you pronounce it. You pronounce it differently depending on if she came from a different country. That's how some of those names are. But I do find that movie really charming. I don't really find Sweet Body of Deborah charming. Again, like I said, I like Jean Sorel, but there are plenty other Giallo films that he is in that I prefer more. And if you're talking about Jean Sorel and Carol Baker, I'm gonna watch Quiet Place to Kill any day over Sweet Body of Deborah. But yes, I do recommend it. I kind of allowed that to burn out, which is good because that's about everything I had to say anyway. So thank you for watching. We'll see if I finish this right now or if I watch A Black Veil for Lisa and finish this, because that will be the next movie I will be doing a rat hole burn reviews for. And until next time, this is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo. Thank you. I'll see you next time.